Tom's World Scale Model Series. In this installment, we unbox Takom's SDKFZ 186 Jagdtiger Tank Hunter. If you enjoy programming on scale modeling, then show your support by subscribing to this channel. Leave us a comment, like, dislike, or share the video with friends. Clicking the notification bell gives you alerts when we post new content. Or visit the channel Tom's World for a friendly visit for a complete list of all our videos. The Jagdtiger was perhaps the ultimate expression of the German Army's late war fixation with ever larger and more powerful weapons. At 73 tons, this lumbering steel monster was the heaviest armored vehicle to fight in World War II. Its massive 250mm of frontal armor was only surpassed in scale by its colossal 128mm gun. Although of questionable strategic and tactical value given its huge material consumption, limited numbers, and mechanical unreliability, the Jagdtiger is still an object of fascination for armor enthusiasts. So stick with us as we unbox Takom's fine-scale rendition of Germany's most powerful and awesome tank hunter. Hey fellas, welcome back and thank you for dropping by and visiting again. Well, we've got another fantastic kit to look at. This is Takom's Jagdtiger SDKFZ 186 with parts to build either the early or late version. This is kit number 8001, released in 2019 as a new tool. And the kit sells for about $42 US or 56 Canadian dollars today. And here's our box dimensions so we get a sense of how big the actual product is. Although the Jagdtiger is generally regarded as a tank destroyer, it originated with a 1942 Army requirement for a heavy assault vehicle, with the 12.8cm gun being specified. In this form, the vehicle was intended to support infantry by battering down heavy fortifications or by defeating tanks. But by July 1944, when the JTiger finally entered production, the war situation had changed for Germany, and the inexorable flood of Allied armor created an urgent need for mobile tank destroyers. The Jagdtiger was conceived in the German Army tradition of building upon existing production tank hulls to design Sturmgeschütz-style turretless mobile gun variations. The Hetzer, Jagdpanther, and Jagdpanzer were other examples of this design philosophy. The Jagdtiger's gun was stupefyingly large and is the same gun as was specified for the Super Heavy Maus. The gun and cradle weighed an astonishing 6,500 kilograms or 14.3 thousand pounds, and the barrel was 7 meters or 23 feet long, which was longer than a Panzer IV hull. In its indirect fire artillery configuration, the gun could hurl a 28-kilogram projectile out to 21 kilometers. As a tank gun, it was lethal up to 3 kilometers and could easily reach out to 4 kilometers or beyond. That outranged most tank guns of the time, and no Allied armor was proof against it. Because of the large size of the shells, the gun used two-part ammunition with several shell types, with the powder charge adjusted depending on the situation. A second loader was also added to assist with manhandling the giant shells and powder charges into the gun breech. And although the fighting compartment seems large, the huge gun breech left little room for the 4-man and ammunition that was crammed into it. Also note that the Jagdtiger's gun configuration, unlike its towed version, dispensed with the muzzle brake since it fouled the fins of anti-armor sabot rounds. The Jagdtiger was trialed with two suspension configurations, the so-called Porsche and Henschel types. The Porsche version used 8 running wheels per side. Our kit has 9, which tells us this boxing is the Henschel type. The kit comes with parts to build both the early and late versions, although the differences are quite subtle. The quickest way to distinguish the two is by the number of spare tracks or brackets on the casement sides. The early version had 8 mounting brackets, while the late had 12. If you see markings in the middle of the casement sides, chances are you're looking at an early version. We'll look more closely at how to distinguish the variants in our build episode. At $42 US, the kit is inexpensive by today's standards. What's contained in the box, including brass parts and individual track links, is very detailed and crisp, but the boxing lacks figures, stowage, and clear parts. But our base price certainly leaves a bit of a budget for these accessories if we're so inclined to go with aftermarket. Before we dive into the box, as always, let's look at the Takom product line and let's see which other manufacturers offer Jagdtiger kits. Takom has released 4 boxings since 2019, and each uses many of the same sprues, so their build-up is very similar. In addition to our sample kit with the Henschel suspension, the Porsche production type is also offered as kit 8003. Here we see how Takom builds up the Porsche suspension. Kit 8008 lets us build either the 128mm or 88mm gun versions of the JTiger in its early configuration. The kit comes with split styrene gun barrels for the 128 and 88, but also includes a nice turned aluminum barrel for the 128. Takom's fourth JTiger, released in 2023, Kit 8012, depicts the Porsche suspension early version with molded-on Zimmerit. The entire Takom line is priced in and around the $45 to $50 range. This makes it one of the least expensive of all the modern releases across all manufacturers. Several manufacturers have released 1/35th scale Jagdtiger kits, and here are just a few of them. There's too many kits to cover in detail, so we'll look at the most notable ones, or those that are most commonly available in North America. Tamiya has released two major toolings over the years, and we just couldn't resist a little nostalgia, with the first release appearing way back in 1967. This tooling re-emerged several times over the years, with boxings in the 60s and 70s appearing with the battlefield realism cover art that I fell in love with as a boy. Tamiya's new tool appeared in 2008 with 3 boxings released throughout 2010 to 2013. The kit depicts the early version Henschel type. These kits brought Tamiya's JTiger line to modern standards, complete with Lincoln-length tracks, figures, and photo wedge grills for Kit 25-162. Although inexplicably, even in the new toolings, Tamiya still retains the old-style split-barrel build-up. Aside from that, these kits are typical Tamiya with crisp molding, superb engineering, which delivers worry-free construction that builders have come to expect. Although the kit's quality and engineering come at a price, since these products can run as high as $65 today. As usual, Dragon hits us with a tsunami of product offerings. First released in 1995, and since then, no fewer than 12 boxings have appeared between the Dragon and Platts brands. Kits prior to 2005 have labor-intensive tracks and 2-part barrels. The 2005 and subsequent releases come with simplified sprue-mounted easy tracks or separate pre-dressed magic tracks. Some boxings contain styrene split barrels, but most come with aluminum turned barrels. Other usual Dragon accoutrements include a brass shell, metal towing clevises, clear parts, wire tow cables, PE, and some even have molded on Zimmerit. If you've got your heart set on a Dragon JTiger, probably best to get one of the newer kits. These newer Dragon products are premium kits and come with a commiserate price of $65 to $71. Hobby Boss has released 2 boxings, kits 84-562 and 84-564, released in 2022 and 2023. Both the Porsche and Henschel derivations are available, although both are the early version of the Jagdtiger. These kits feature nice casting and good kit engineering with PE and clear parts, although the styrene split barrels are still maintained. Perhaps the most notable feature about these kits, for better or worse, are the multi-part separate track links. It appears that each link has 11 parts, so for builders not keen on investing several mind-numbing hours of track assembly repetition, aftermarket pre-dressed tracks are likely a better alternative. Still, the Hobby Boss offerings are a solid choice for advanced builders who crave complexity and detail, with the kits ranging in the $67 to $70 range today. Still, the Takom line is an excellent choice for the budget-minded modeler. At $45 to $50 US, these kits offer excellent value without compromising quality or detail. These are no-frills, get-what-you-need-in-the-box kits that leave enough room in the budget for aftermarket figures and stowage. As a result, our sample kit was a natural choice for our next building project. Well, time for the big unboxing. That just never grows old, and that's why we say so many models, so little time. Now, the kit may not be packed the same as seen here since I rummaged through the boxes before recording the video, but we get 9 sprues, 1 PE sheet, metal cabling, but no clear parts. A total of 578 styrene parts, but we don't use them all depending on the variant we build. So let's get everything out of the box so we can see what we're working with. So when it comes to instruction booklets, I've griped about the teeny size of literature that Takom usually packs in their boxes. For example, this is the booklet we got in the Takom Stug 3 kit. But befitting the behemoth Jagdtiger, the company's come up with this, a supersized version. So kudos to Takom for taking it easy on my eyes and neck on this project. There's too many pages to go into detail in the instructions, but we'll fly through it and hit the salient points. So on our first page, we find a symbol legend, so we'll have to pay attention to those as we build. There's also a list of the paint colors we'll need. And we do get a sprue map which helps us stay organized. We begin the build by installing our swing arms. The Jagdtiger has torsion bar suspension, and we see that the arms on the left are trailing, while on the right they face forward. And we get these jigs to help us align our arms so our model doesn't wobble once the wheels are installed. And here we see the overlapping wheel arrangement. There's 9 wheels, which tells us this is the Henschel suspension. The jigs are also used to get the proper sag on our length and link tracks. Here we're installing the tracks. The Jagdtiger has no return rollers, and we get these profiles to check that our tracks have the proper sag. Here we see the convention used in the instructions to tell us which variant parts to use. We get the step number, then a -1 for the early version and -2 for the late. We see slight differences. For example, the late version has a towing pintle. This is a blitz kit, so the buildup is somewhat simplified. For example, the jack has 5 parts, whereas if you remember, our Jagdpanther had almost double that. We also see that we have to scrape off some protuberances, and the instructions call for some holes to be drilled. Here the hull plate is installed, as well as the rear fenders. This kit has very few large components, with most of the work going into attaching many small detail parts, and depending on the variant we build, we have a few holes to drill or some details to scrape off. Here we see the track build-up detail. Each link is built up with 2 parts, but thankfully no separate guide horns like our Jagdpanther. Here we're building up our travel lock, and we want to pay attention to these little cutaway features. They help us get our part placement correct. Many more small details get attached in step 15. Step 17 installs our periscopes, and they're solid styrene. The kit doesn't contain any clear parts. And we notice the machine gun buildup, which appears that the gun is articulated. And here we're installing our PE grill covers, tools, brush cards, and other details. It does appear like the rear casement door is also functional. We also get an MG42, which is mounted on the rear deck on a post. This was ostensibly for anti-air work. And here's the 2-part gun barrel, which is a little disappointing. Not sure why this modern kit doesn't contain a single part barrel, but we do get an end cap, and we'll use our 2-part glue up trick to hide the seam. But it does appear that the buildup permits the gun to elevate and traverse, which is kind of nice. Here we're installing the side fenders, and we can see the slight variant difference in the gun collars. And finally we install our front fenders, which differ on the 2 variants. We do get full color paint guides, and we get markings and camouflage schemes for 5 different vehicles, although 4 of them are for the early version. Also contained in the box is a little bag of various and sundries. We get the small sheet of decals with markings for 5 vehicles. These look like an in-house brand. We see quite a bit of matte carrier film between the letters and on the Balkenkreuz, which we'll have to trim off. We get a 22 centimeter or 8.5 inch length of twisted copper wire. This is not our towing cable, which we'll look at later. Rather, it's a loop of cable that gets attached to the engine deck. And here's our photo etch with engine grills. The small circle is for a filler cap on the engine deck, and the tiny rectangular pieces are for brackets that hold the wire coil on the engine deck. And here are the jigs that help us align our wheels. We also use these to get the proper sag on our tracks. Moving on to the plastic, there's too many parts to explore in detail, so we'll cover just the highlights. Starting with our larger pieces, being a blitz kit, we get a simplified bathtub style hull, and the superstructure is mostly one piece. We see the crisp and sharp casting on the engine deck. Also, the outer surfaces have a nice, rough, raw metal texture. Note the beautiful weld bead detail where the plates are joined. And here's the 2-part split barrel. Not my favorite design, since there's a danger of the seam showing once assembled. A little disappointing since this is a relatively new tool. Not sure why Takom didn't go with a solid barrel like our Jagdpanther. For size, although the lens parallax distorts the tape measure, the barrel is nearly 18 centimeters or 7 inches long. The hull rear plate illustrates some of the very crisp bolt detail. Here we see our nicely detailed swing arms. And onto the wheels, also crisply molded and nicely detailed. The Jagdtiger had all steel wheels, so there's no rubber rims to mask when we paint. And here's our drive sprocket. And the idler wheels are also nicely detailed. The kit comes with its fair share of very tiny parts, mostly hooks, grab handles, and such. A good pair of tweezers and steady hands will come in handy. As mentioned, our tow cables come as styrene parts, not metal cabling. Takom's approach here is reminiscent of the cabling we used to find in our JTiger kits. And here's one of the rear fenders. Note the nice hinge detail. Moving along, we get this nicely cast MG42, which gets mounted on the rear deck. Unfortunately, its barrel is solid, so we'll see if we can hollow it out. And here's a nice detail. This is the wire that runs out of the fighting compartment to power the Bosch headlamp. Most kits emit this, so kudos to Takom for this attention to detail. We also see the nice casting on the fire extinguisher. Here we see more examples of that rough metal texture and the beautiful weld bead detail that we find on the exterior surfaces. Very nice. One little bugaboo in this kit are the solid clips on the tool tie downs. This is very common in many kits. It's a little disappointing when we compare these with our Meng Jagdpanther that addressed this issue. The kit also comes with solid plastic telescopes. Not a deal breaker, but I prefer clear plastic for periscopes. We also find some nasty knockout scars on the back, but these are likely hidden once installed, so we won't have to mess with filling these hopefully. Note the beautiful wing nut detail on the tie downs. And the final drives also have very crisp and sharp nut and bolt detailing. We get 2 small sprues with different parts for our early and late version. It looks like one of the gun collars is slide molded. And here's the jack block. I have to say this is probably the nicest wood texture I've ever seen in any kit. Excellent attention to detail here. And we get 2 slightly different engine decks depending on the variant we build. Again, note the nice rough metal texturing. And we get 2 slightly different front fenders, again for the 2 variants. And finally our tracks. They're length and link, they're very crisp and sharply cast, and to our great relief there are only very subtle knockout scars on the outside, which we can hide with weathering. The inside surfaces of the tracks are perfectly smooth also, and also to our great relief the tracks come with guide horns cast on. Anyone who's had to assemble hundreds of guide horns like we did in our Meng Jagdpanther kit can really appreciate pre-assembled guide horns like this. And that'll do it for this episode. Join us again as we take our Takom Jagdtiger through to the building stage in our next installment. In the meantime, why not subscribe to the channel? Otherwise, leave us a like, dislike, share the video, or feel free to ravage us in the comments. Or mosey on down to the channel Tom's World to see a complete list of all our educational and entertaining videos. In the meantime, keep your workspace well ventilated and your workbench tidy. Stay well and all the best.